got to replace his every couple years. He floors it too much. As the automakers try to put a good face on today, worries about the impact of a possible bankruptcy from General Motors, though, are spreading. And there's no doubt it would be, well, it would have a huge impact on the Detroit area. The question is, would it be devastating or not? Joining us to give us his view on General Motors and the effect of a bankruptcy is Representative Thaddeus McCotter, a Republican congressman from Michigan and member of the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman McCotter, this is a big issue because the word bankruptcy means something different to pretty much everybody. But in many senses in this country, it is that. It is a word. A company keeps operating and is hypothetically able to reorganize. Now, in this case, that could mean dramatic changes for some of those union contracts. But does it mean that bankruptcy is not necessarily a bad word for GM?
It is for us in Michigan. It is throughout GM and Chrysler at the present time. But we also understand that with the president's decision that they have 60 days at GM to restructure, and they have 30 days at Chrysler to merge with Fiat, that there is a substantial likelihood this could happen. One of the things we would like to know from the administration is if the original viability plans were not sufficient to show profitability, what would be in terms of jobs lost, in terms of retirees' health care being cut. But instead what we're seeing are policy goals out of the administration, which goes to the earlier point that Mr. LeBeau talked about, is are they starting to get to the point where they tell you what kind of cars to make? Well, they're clearly heading in that direction. Yet we've seen nothing about the profitability that they believe is necessary to show a viable company in the future.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing from people who are opposed to the bankruptcy is that, when you go into bankruptcy, there are all sorts of possibilities. You can go in with what they call a prepackaged bankruptcy, but nonetheless, when you're in front of a bankruptcy judge, anyone can come along and say, hey, I've got a better plan, and throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing. Second concern is, what's the impact on the suppliers, which then might ripple through to Ford, which is not in as dire straits, or even the Japanese automakers located in the U.S. I mean, it's a real can of worms, isn't it?
Well, the two questions right there. The first is the uncertainty of the people who work in the industry. When we knew from the plans that were put forward, 50,000 people were going to lose their jobs, even in a best case scenario, you could prepare for that. You, as someone who worked there, was worried about your family, could be ready for that eventuality. Right now, there is absolute uncertainty as to who, what, when may happen to you as an employee. As for the suppliers, the administration has put forward $5 billion, which will then carry them through as the timeline heads towards a potential bankruptcy. So it will eventually meet there when we know what type of restructured industries we're supposed to have. But right now, again, where is that direction for the administration?
Do you have the job support? So, I know there's a big question mark. If we had bankruptcy, how quickly would you lose jobs and how many? And then, of course, you've already had a hemorrhage of jobs from those companies. But when people say there's a social engineering question here, what happens to your part of the country if a lot of these towns that have one plant don't have a plant anymore? Is that something that you think people are starting to have a plan about, or that there are jobs to retrain for, or do we really not know where to start?
Well, I think the president announced Dr. Montgomery coming in as what would eventually be for auto workers and manufacturing an economic Katrina, which is one of the reasons the absence of jobs lost out of the administration is very ominous to us back home. Because if you're appointing someone to handle the societal costs of the bankruptcy or the restructuring itself, tell us, so that we can be ready for it. But the social cost is something we've never argued that we shouldn't restructure. We've been restructuring. In short, what we're really asking for was time to unwind it and do it as painlessly as possible, with ultimately as little strain on the social safety net as possible. Instead, the timeline has been cut. We have 60 days, 30 days, but we'd just like to know what we're looking at so we can deal with it.
All right, sir, thank you very much. What Representative Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan, all sorts of interesting issues.
Some fascinating issues.
But